Shalom, 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 shalom. First and foremost, giving infinite praises, glory, and honor unto Yahweh by Hashem, Yahushua by Hashem, Wachakodash, giving double honors to our apostles and elders of Great Millstone and shalom and salutation to all you sincere Akim across the four winds, pushing this truth with sincerity of heart. I'm your fellow servant, Kasab Magan from the DC camp, coming at you through the spirit and power of Yahweh by Hashem, Yahushua by Hashem, Wachakodash for the elect. Um, Salaki for my voice got a little cold, but I just wanted to make a quick exhortation lesson for the hopeful elect. All right, the men of the Lord in this gospel. All right, so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native Americans, the prophets, and also really the remaining of the 1/3 as well, because we living in some critical times. As you know, all hell is getting ready to break loose. And, although, listen, we've said this several times, we've said this over the years, but the signs that are showing now, you see what's going on with Gog and Magog, the Russians have just elevated, escalated modern warfare to a new level, right? Using ballistic missiles. When I said ballistic missiles, not nukes, because you can have, ICBMs and you can shoot out ICBMs into the upper atmosphere, but if you don't have if you don't have nukes in the warheads, then it's not really a nuclear missile. It's just ballistic means it's able to travel with great speed and also go into the upper atmosphere to evade, satellites and shit like that. But basically, we living in some very, very crazy times, and anything could pop off at any time. And I wanted to just really make a quick one, dealing with how we conduct ourselves in these times, and dealing with excess rioting and keyword emphasis on excess, because and listen, this is a lesson that I'm, of course you can't teach and be a hypocrite. I'll be the first one to say that, definitely will find myself in these situations as well. That's something that applies to all of us, especially the ones of us that are either I probably said bachelors or younger brothers, because there's a certain lifestyle that a man that has a so-called family will have in his truth, and there's a certain other lifestyle that a man who's a bachelor in his truth will have. I mean, we well aware of that, and this is really something that we need to reduce tremendously, and if you can manage to get to the point where you don't even do it, but that's fine. But just don't do anything in excess. So the writing part, as you see right here, is really partying. It's funny because when I just typed in writing, Riot, it says right here you got this place called a Riot House nightclub. All right, so it tells you already that this word riot that I'm using is not talking about actually rioting and and causing chaos and breaking shit up. Although those things can kind of happen as well when you're in that environment. We're really talking about this right here. This is this is First Peter's 4:1. Subtitle: Keep fervent in your love. It says, for as much then as Hamashiach Yahushua has suffered for us in the flesh, arm yourselves likewise with the same mind. For he that has suffered in the flesh has ceased from sin, all right, that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of the Most High. All right, so once you've been awakened through the Holy Spirit, and you got this truth, this gospel, you got the name Yahweh Bashim El Shai, you got your nationality, your tribe, and the customs. You need to understand that now your life, belongs to Yahweh Shai, because he died on the cross for the remission of your sins. So therefore, your life doesn't belong to you. So therefore, you have to keep um, those lusts of men to a bare minimum. Now, of course, you should, that's why understanding is very important because I can come here and say, well, Yahweh Shai died for your sins, so you should have no lust whatsoever, no wicked, well, I said wicked, well, you shouldn't have wicked lust, but no lust of men whatsoever. Well, that wouldn't be realistic, all right? That wouldn't be realistic. Right? It would be like me telling you, well, now that you're in the truth, you should stay in your house every day, all day. Well, you still got to go to work. You still have to kind of go out there and find some type of balance, some type of muse, right? Some type of amusement, so you don't go absolutely crazy and lose your mind. So that's not what it's talking about. It's not talking about living the life of a hermit, but it's understanding the times and understanding that you got to make adjustments, all right, and minimize those things to a bare minimum, all right. It's very important because the times that we're going in, you can't be caught out there with these people, man. A lot of these people, the majority of so-called Negroes, Hispanics, and Native Americans that engage in these activities, you know, they're gonna get caught out there and they're gonna get judged. They're gonna be put to death. We living in the age of false flags. So a false flag can happen at any time, and of course, if you're not a part of the elect, you're gonna get caught out there regardless. But you could be an elect and be hard headed and be caught up in a situation where you wish you hadn't really been there. Because just because you're an elect doesn't mean that you're gonna escape unarmed. As a lot of us have found out. There's so many things that can still happen to you, even though you're a part of the elect, that could really make this journey a lot more difficult than it ought to be. Um, Verse 2 it says, "For that he no longer should live the rest of his time in the flesh to the lust of men, but to the will of the Most High." Verse 3 it says, "For the time past of our life may suffice us to have wrought the will of the Gentiles, when we walked in lasciviousness, lust, excess of wine." That's another thing, excess of wine, because that's the key point, is excess, all right, which means overboard. Excess of wine, revelings, banquetings, and abominable idolatries. Verse 4, it says, "Wherein they think it strange that ye run not with them to the same excess of riot, speaking evil of you." So you have the majority of Israel, because sometimes you make some acquaintances in this world, right? Because you kind of have a little bit of friendship with Mammon, because you have networking. You network with some of these people, and these people live in excess of writing. So you might end up in a situation where you have to kind of be around these people because you're trying to move. You're trying to do some things personal, because this has nothing to do with the scriptures. All right, there's no networking that you're doing with the people in this world that's going to further the gospel. So a lot of times when you're doing a network, it's really a lot of times to help your personal situation, maybe finances, to improve your finances, which is nothing wrong with it. But understand that you got to keep that stuff to a minimum. And if it's getting in the way of the gospel, you got to cut that shit off. But yeah, a lot of times you got to find yourself in these places where there's excess writing. You have to be out. You have to be a super extrovert, and that's when things could be a problem. All right, now let's look up the word riot. Let's look up the word riot. When you look up the word riot on Edom Online, it says the following of a wrong sent by hounds. That's debauchery, extravagance, wanton living. Now, when you go down, it says behave in a dissolute manner, engage in loose revelry. Right, revelry is like those parties, right? Constantly partying. Uh, a dispute, quarrel. We're not talking about that. Um, right. So it says right here is revelry. Right? When you look up the word revelry, it tells you it's talking about these the constant, constant partying, because you're seeking to please the flesh, and that's the main point. You don't want to do nothing in excess, and the problem is doing these things in excess of writing. As a matter of fact, let me see if I can go to First Peter 4:4. Let's see if I can read this in the NLT, right? First Peter 4:4 says, "Of course, your former friends." Ooh, this is good. I already know this is gonna be good. First Peter 4:4. Of course, your former friends are surprised when you no longer plunge into the flood of wild and destructive things they do, right? The crash outs, right? Especially when you come into this gospel, you ain't moving around funny and crashing out, making impulsive decisions. So the people that you know in the world, they're gonna have a problem. They're gonna look at you different. It says so they slander you. All right, so they slander you. All right, so they're gonna talk shit about you because you changed your life. All right, it's very important. Now let's read this in the CSB. First Peter 1:4. They are surprised that you don't join them in the same flood of wild living, and they slander you. So as a man of the Lord, you can't be caught up in some wild living, man. All right. Oh man, look on the bottom right here it says end time ethics. So that excess writing is not part of the end time ethics. I like that title. I might just have that as a big title, end time ethics, and maybe subtitle excess writing. I like that end time ethics. I like that. I like the sound of that. This is Titus chapter 1, and I'm going to start at 5, qualification of elders. So of course the elders are not, the elders definitely. That's definitely if you're an elder in the camp, or a leader in the camp, a bishop or whatever, you're definitely held to a higher standard. And like I said, that's why even myself, you know what I'm saying, I definitely know this definitely applies to me. As a bachelor, also slash elder, so to speak. I've understood that the days of being out there like that had to be reduced. Because you can't keep up that life that lifestyle and then at the same time leave the church. That's something that eventually you understand that your responsibilities. So you can't really go crazy. Now it doesn't mean that I'm staying home. What I'm saying, by myself. Within the four walls and just losing my mind. That's not what it means. It's just reducing that stuff, man. Titus 1:5 it said, "For this cause left ID in Crete, that thou shouldest set in order the things that are wanting, and ordain elders in every city, as I had appointed thee. If any be blameless, the husband of one wife, having faithful children, not accused of riot or unruly." All right, so not accused of riot or unruly. Let me see. And let's see, because we're focusing on the word riot. And Salaki for the audio. I'm really doing this off of our chariot. So Salaki, if the audio is kind of funny, for some reason it's linking up as a phone call in my chariot. That's Satan. Titus 1:6. It says, "An elder must live a blameless life. He must be faithful to his wife, and his children must be believers who don't have a reputation for being wild and rebellious." All right, so that's a good one. CSB 1:6. An elder must be blameless, the husband of one wife with faithful children who are not accused of wildness and rebellion. So it says, as an overseer of the Most High's household, he must be blameless, not arrogant, not hot tempered, not an excessive drinker, not a bully, not greedy for money, but hospitable, loving what is good, sensible, righteous, holy, self controlled. All right, so self control is very important because if you go out once in a while, there's nothing wrong with that. But if you're constantly going out, especially as things are getting really bad out here, man, people crashing out. There's a bunch of demons out there, man. These people are losing their minds. They're looking for one particular thing, one small thing to just crash out because they're losers and they're losing. Their kingdom is falling apart. They have no answers. The new wine is languishing. So now they're looking to just, the whole hurt people, hurt people. You got a lot of people out there, including our people, Negroes, Hispanics, Native Americans. We are at the forefront of acting like monkeys out here. But also the nations, man. You have Edomites out here that'll turn your TV off, man, because they are losing and they are not happy about that. Second Peter chapter 2 verse 13 it says, Let me see. I'm gonna start at uh 12. Second Peter chapter 2 verse 12 it says, "But these, as natural brute beasts, made to be taken and destroyed, speak evil of the things that they understand not, and shall utterly perish in their own corruption." Now, this is talking about Israelites that know that they're Israelites and they're wicked, like like these dudes in these different camps, and these Israelites that know that they're Israelites, but again, they're just completely wicked. They're corrupt. They still think and move like Babylonians. Verse 13, "And shall receive the reward of unrighteousness as they that count it pleasure to riot in the daytime, spots that they are and blemishes, sporting themselves with their own deceivings while they feast with you." All right, so let me see if I can read this in the NLT. 13, "Their destruction is their reward for the harm they have done. They love to indulge in evil pleasures in broad daylight. They are a disgrace and a stain among you. They delight in deception, even as they eat with you in your fellowship meals." Right, and again, that goes to these wicked Israelites in these different camps. All right, you have individuals like that, and you also have a few demons, reprobates, even in Great Millstone, man. But these guys, especially now with the heightened awareness, the experience that the elders have in these different camps, these guys get spotted out real quick. Even us, like we had a couple of guys that came in and they got the boot. Said within a week or two they got the boot. Because this ain't 2007 where we sitting here and and we giving opportunities after opportunities to a man who clearly doesn't give a fuck. Because he's a whole 2/3. We not in them times no more, bruh. All right, our ability to spot a nigga has gotten really really acute, man. All right, so let's go to Romans 13, Romans 13 and 13. Well, actually, I'm gonna start at 11. Romans 13 and 11 in the NLT, it says, "This is all the more urgent, for you know how late it is. Time is running out. Wake up, for our salvation is nearer than when we first believed." All right? So our salvation is nearer, man. Like, although sometimes it feels like it's still a ways away, it's really a lot closer than we believe because, of course, I understand we've had to do a couple of things, be occupied while we occupy the prophecy. But we have jobs. We still have trying to network and trying to better our situation um financially and all that. But at the same time, like you can't be pulled into this world, because this is urgent. Time is running out. You have to make sure that you're on point. Again, the excess of writing is just not good, man. So let's keep going. It says, verse 12, "The night is almost gone. The day of salvation will soon be here. So remove your dark deeds like dirty clothes and put on the shining armor of right living." All right, so the scripture was talking about wild living, versus right living. All right, verse 13, because we belong to the day, we must live decent lives for all to see. Don't participate in the darkness of wild parties and drunkenness, or in sexual promiscuity, in immoral living, or in quarreling and jealousy. So and again, I speak here as a man who is, guilty in all counts. So, you know, I understand that we all must do better. We all must understand the gravity of what we are part of, and we all must make adjustments. And I believe, and it starts with the preacher, right? Because you got to practice what you preach, right? So you're talking about participating in the darkness of wild parties. Like again, like myself being a man who's been a bachelor pretty much for a long time. It's you know, yes, I have a lot of you have a lot of time, for the gospel, and then yes, you put in the time for the gospel, and then you have a little bit more time for yourself because you don't have a wife and children, and so what tends to happen is, of course, you're trying to find a muse, right, a way to amuse yourself, which there's nothing wrong with that. But of course, you'll do it once in a while, but then the flesh will require, because you got a lot of time in your hand, you got a little bit of time, the flesh will require, will ask for more. You'll start digging for more, and you'll start pushing the envelope. And that's usually when something kind of messed up happens to you, right? Brothers that have experience, they know this. You might have a little bit of fun, but then, you get into this zone where you're having a little bit more fun, a little bit too much fun, and it's not even that it's fun. Is that you're chasing, right? Are you chasing that lust, that carnal feeling, that fake pleasure that comes with partaking in these these rioting parties, right? You chase that. You chase that feeling. So instead of going out once in a while, you're going out, weekly. Listen, man, if you're going out every weekend in this gospel, you are in a wrong spirit. I'm gonna be honest with you, man, from top to bottom. If you are one in this gospel, in Great Millstone, if you're going out every week, you out there, what I'm saying, with these in these parties, riding, that's called excess of riding. That is not the spirit that you're supposed to be as a man of the Lord. Once in a while is okay, because you got to find a balance. But that excess riding, I'm telling you, you're gonna get hurt. I speak from experience. I speak from a man who, a lot of the stuff that I got hurt personally was me doing excess of riding. And so I can speak from that angle. And there's brothers that know what I'm talking about. It makes, when you get hurt, it makes life very difficult. You got to bring yourself out of financial holes, and living situations can change because of that. So be very, wary and of that, and also the sexual promiscuity. I mean, again, that's something that I've been. Again, I speak from experience and not a hypocrite. You know, um, I've as a man of the Lord, I've lived that life. As a bachelor, and there's consequences to that, man. And I've lived. Listen, you engage into this long enough, you will meet the consequences. And it's truth. Just because you're an elect, a hopeful elect, I'm gonna say that you're a hopeful elect, you mean you think that you're gonna be spared from the consequences of excess riding or the consequences of sexual promiscuity. You're gonna find out. You're gonna find out the hard way. You're gonna get humble out here, man. This world is wicked. These people are wicked. All right. These women are extremely wicked. These women carry a lot of diseases. It's some wild shit out here, man. It really is. It's bad. So just be mindful of it. All right. It says immoral living or in quarreling and jealousy. All right. So it's very critical, man, and we speak about these things. They can be sensitive topics, but it's for the betterment of the gospel. So therefore, we have to touch on this, man. It does no one no good to be acting like this. These scriptures are speaking about 2/3. These scriptures right here are clearly speaking to the hopeful elect. The Lord is not talking to the 2/3. So why would you not teach in great details? I know it's all right. Especially if you're an elder in the gospel, man. If you've been through certain things, man, you've been through certain things, you got delivered. Your job is to teach about those sensitive topics. You don't have to go into great details and expose your personal life, but you have to be able to touch on these topics to help these brothers around you that are coming up, so they won't make the same critical mistakes and have to dig themselves out of these crazy ass holes. All right. Romans 13:14, it says, instead, clothe yourself with the presence of the Lord Yahweh Shah HaMashiach, and don't let yourself think about ways to indulge your evil desires, right? So, you definitely don't want to do that. Again, the excess is the real problem. 2 Peter 3:10, it says, in the NLT, but the day of the Lord will come as unexpectedly as a thief. Then the heavens will pass away with a terrible noise, right? The heavens is talking about this power, the system, the way of life. This is all going to pass away, man. So being around these demons, because you trying to network and or these women because they kind of, they bring that fake temporary pleasure. Again, it's not to say that you should not network. It's not to say that you should not be dealing with women, but there is such a thing as an excess. Excess of writing, excess of, you know, sexual desires. Like I said, there is a price to pay for that. You know what I'm saying? Like it's a give and take. If you're gonna be a bachelor in this gospel, there's a benefit to it and there's a downside. There's a downside to it. If you're gonna be a man that has a rib or whatever with children, there's a benefit to that, but also there's a downside to it, which Paul talked about. The downside of having a so-called rib in this gospel, right? So you need to be aware of all sizes. Um, Second Peter 3:10. But the day of the Lord will come as unexpectedly as a thief. Then the heavens will pass away with a terrible noise, the nukes, and the very elements themselves will disappear in fire, and the earth and everything on it will be found to deserve judgment. All right. So, well, actually, verse 11. Since everything around us is going to be destroyed like this, what holy and godly lives should should live? All right, and living a godly life doesn't mean you got to be at home every day. Right, you go to work, you go to the plantation, and then you study, you make your lessons, you check on the brotherhood, and then you go to sleep. Listen, man, none of us are living that type of life, bro. Because you would go absolutely nuts and crazy if that was the only routine. So you got to find a balance, find a little bit of muse, just enough muse to get you, you know, get your flesh to kind of leave you alone, right? Because you do this for your flesh to leave you alone. You don't do this really because you're chasing this. You do this so that you feed the flesh just enough to leave it the fuck alone, so you can focus on the things that really matter. All right, so that's the mindset that we have when we dealing with the lust of the flesh. Feed it just enough so it doesn't drive you crazy, but don't get in the mindset of, oh, this is what I really want to do, because then you in a different spirit. Verse 11, since everything around us is going to be destroyed like this, what holy and godly lives you should live, looking forward to that day of the Most High and hurrying it along. On that day, he will set the heavens on fire, and the elements will melt away with in the flames. All right? But we are looking forward to the new heavens and the new earth. He has promised a world filled with the Most High's righteousness. So yeah, a new heavens and a new earth, meaning a new system, a new government on this earth, right? That's what it means, not an actual new planet. But yeah, that's what we're looking forward to. And also, and when the cancer is extracted, what I'm saying, insight on the next lesson, Lord willing, when the cancer is extracted, right, the earth will be revived, and that's gonna be, Lord willing, the title of my next lesson. When the cancer is extracted from the earth is gonna be revived. So you already know what the cancer is that needs to be extracted from the earth. All right, that cancerous. I ain't gonna say it, you should already know. But yeah, let's conclude with Second Ezra 14, and we're gonna start at 13. Now therefore set thine house in order, and reprove thy people, comfort such of them as be in trouble, and now renounce corruption. All right, plain and simple. Let go from thee mortal thoughts, cast away the burdens of men, put off now the weak nature, and set aside the thoughts that are most heavy unto thee, and haste thee to flee from these times. For yet greater evils than those which thou hast seen happen shall be done hereafter. All right, so greater evils are coming, man. So we have to make sure we don't continue to indulge. We don't indulge in excess of writing. Everything has to be minimalized and just enough to get by. So hopefully you were edified with this lesson as well as I was, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Shai. Call Halam La Yahweh Bashim, Yahushua Bashim, Dash, double honors to our apostles and elders, a great millstone. Shalom and salutation to you, sincere elect. Shalom.